What is up, fight fans? Welcome to the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. You can give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. First off, I want to give a huge shout out here to the crew at the Mile High Sports Network. They're doing big things across all platforms, so make sure that you smash that subscribe, that follow, whatever it may be for that particular medium. There is no shortage of news across the football landscape right now. Winter sports are on the horizon of starting their regular seasons. It is great things that are happening, whether it's the SCO show with Danilo to any of the coverage right now. I know the Broncos had a bad weekend this last weekend, but again, there's lots of headlines that are going around league wide. So make sure that you check them out here, whether that is on these airwaves, the 98.1 FM radio channel, the podcast network, milehighsports.com, the magazine, any of the merch. Be sure to keep up to the latest and greatest at Mile High Sports here. Moving along from that, there is going to be a few more events coming up and down the front range to close out the year here in 2024. As always, guys, we like to stress the message here to pick up your tickets if you can directly from the fighters on the cards or using that online point of sale system with one of their names. That directly benefits them in the process. This weekend, there's going to be a high stakes grappling tournament going down. There is the Combat Sports Report Invitational. It's 16-man sub-only brackets. And in terms of what that looks like, put in your 100, win 15 back. It's pretty nice little payout if you are willing to go out there and put the money on the mat and test your skills. If you want to check out the action, that is at the Celebrity Confetti Events Place. Again, that's going down on the 19th this weekend. Next weekend, we have a couple of shows happening here in Colorado. We have the LFA returning to the Dobson Arena in Vail. That is one of the highest contested fights in the entire world. It's Vail, Colorado, and Mexico City, the two biggest being here in North America, as far as where fights are contested, both being north of 8,000 feet up there and beyond. It's a effect that absolutely plays into a lot of the fights in the contest, especially for those who aren't used to training at a base level of the Mile High City in Denver. That same night, you have Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship going down here in the Denver area. There's going to be a plethora of local-based fighters on that card, including friend of the program and Chris Camozzi. Like I say, there is no shortage of action that's going to be going down here, whether it is MMA or bare knuckle next weekend. There is going to be bare knuckle boxing on the local level, welcomed in by Sparta Sports and Entertainment. That will be on November 9th at the Blue Credit Arena in Loveland, Colorado. This is kind of a historic point on the local side because we've been sanctioned and allowed per the commission for a couple of major organizations to come in and hold those bare knuckle shows, whether that be BYB or BKFC. But now this opens up the door for things to happen on the local end of things, which that just presents a lot of other opportunities to be had, whether that is platforms like Jorge Masvidal's Gamebred FC, which is a bare knuckle MMA promotion. There could be the potential for bare knuckle Muay Thai sometime in the future. What I would love to see approved or something that is allowed in the future in the mix on the local levels is for us to be able to do 4-ounce Muay Thai. Seeing the fights that we got to see here in the Denver area from one championship directly, not even talking about what you can watch on any given weekend, but just those that you were able to see here alone in our backyard. How can you not be entertained? How can you not love the spectacle that you saw when you had the likes of your Rod Tangs of the world, your Superlex, so on and so forth, that went on and put out these career type highlights for the finishes that they were able to have, or the totality of the fights and the action that was had within them. I think that it's an advantage to us here in Colorado that we have such a big fight community that we're going to take some chances. I would like to see a little bit more done on the innovation side of things just because somebody has to be willing to take the risk to try some things so we figure out what works and what doesn't. Obviously, we've spoken to many different circumstances on this program, whether it relates to the judging, the refereeing, the rule sets, so on and so forth. But what it takes is for certain commissions to have the stones to be willing to go out there and take the chance on trying some of these new procedures. And then from there, we have the data to be able to evaluate whether or not it's an effective tactic or it's something that we should move on from and figure out what's next. But we will never figure out what is the right way to go about operating for the most efficient process for all parties involved until we start trying new things. Following that, right around Thanksgiving, we have CJJC 23 closing out the show on November 23rd. And guys, I want to talk about a couple of things that were sent over on the way to the show. I didn't have them originally in the notes, but because they were a couple of things that you guys sent my way, I want to make sure that we hit them and address them right away. Unfortunately, Platinum Mike Perry was arrested. He was arrested on two charges, one of them being a DUI, the other one refusing a field sobriety test, both carrying a fine and potential ramifications with trial, so on and so forth for him. You know, I hate to see this on any sort of level. There's really in 2024 to get caught driving drunk, I feel like is absolutely crazy. There are so many resources that are out there for you to avoid that situation. And especially someone like Platinum Mike Perry, who's a multimillionaire. Like, come on, bro. You got to do better than that. You're a family man now with kids at home. Like, why would you take the risk? You've also got so many things going in your favor right now. Your promotion and your rule set just got approved. You have multiple other business ventures in the works. Why jeopardize any of those bags just for something in the short term? It's not a good look for Platinum Mike Perry, but hopefully he's able to bounce back from this and none of those opportunities are ultimately squandered because of it. The next topic was, and it didn't really register to me. I watched the interview back and forth and I thought, oh, yeah, it's just general fight talk. But it's been something that obviously has had the attention of some folks on the underground, on the forums, on MMA Reddit, so on and so forth. But the question is, did Ilya Topuria get under Max Holloway's skin with their back and forth exchange that they had last week? Maybe a little bit, but Max is always so even keel and cool as a cucumber with that Hawaiian mana that him having any sort of escalation, I guess, if you will, in his tone or his mannerisms might seem like it's getting under his skin. I think more than anything, Max probably is annoyed, I guess, or I guess you could say probably feels a little disrespected in the process. He's one of the greatest featherweights to ever compete. And Ilya's kinda just writing him off like he's nothing, like he's chopped liver, and Max Holloway saying basically like, "Check the resume." Like, "That's okay. That's fine." And then Ilya telling him that, "Well, you won't do the stand and point like you did with Justin Gaethje, Lamas, any of those guys like you did in the final 10 seconds, the first 10 seconds with me. You won't do that with somebody like me who has my boxing skills and my power." And Max responded to him. I think it was pretty brilliant. He essentially said, "Why would I do that in the first 10 seconds? Like, that's a 0 IQ move as far as the fight goes." Ilya Topuria also said that he doesn't believe that Max would meet him in the middle and have a slugfest the first 10 seconds. I don't think Max would do that either in the first 10 seconds because it's not a wise choice from the fight IQ standpoint. But also overall, if we're talking about the traditional way that Max's signature call out goes, should this fight go all the way to the fifth round and we hit that 24th minute and 50-second mark, Max Holloway will absolutely stand in point, and I don't think Ilya is gonna be the one who has the gas to be able to last throwing with that type of power and octane all the way at that point. Max has a style that's built to be able to carry that volume and that pace throughout 25 minutes, to which he's proved so over now multiple weight classes in a championship reign at featherweight, BMF championship at 155, interim title shot at 155. I think that more than anything, again, maybe not under his skin, as to say that, oh, he's pissed off the way that you saw Connor get Jose Aldo. I think it's more of just an annoyed, like, who is this guy and why is he disrespecting me this way? And it's simply because nobody's ever really taken that route with Max. Max has always been such the likable guy that you really can't say anything wrong or you can't say anything bad about Max Holloway. So I can kind of commend Ilya for going full heel in this situation and pretty much just taking any shot that he can to try to get under Max's skin, who is otherwise, like we say, chill as a cucumber and never really loses his composure. We're going to transition now into talking this last weekend's recap of events. We had the UFC Fight Night that went down in the Apex. The main event was a 5-round electric factory between a couple of Denver-based fighters. You have the Denver native Brandon Raw Dog Royval, the number 1 flyweight contender, who took on number 5 Tatsuro Taira, the fighter originally out of Japan, fighting now by way of Denver. This fight, both fighters had their moments. There was a couple of exchanges where Taira locked in that body triangle on Brandon, and you could see that there was a different level of bite to that body triangle where it absolutely had to create a sense of urgency for Royval to be able to get up, and then the work from the corner and the final rounds from Clay Mata, from Alex Hernandez, and from Luis Gurley telling him, hey, we got to stop giving up our back. Let's use guard play instead of wrestling our way up and potentially exposing the back. If he takes our back, we're in a 2-2 fight right now. That's not going to be a good look. We need to be able to work from the guard system, get ourselves back to the feet, and then box this kid up. And that's exactly what happened. And then the fight finished with Royval on the back of Taira. And, he seals his number 1 spot. He said, who else now? I totally agree with Brandon. The way that the division has played out, he's beat everybody else in the top 5. The one wild card out there is Albazi. I don't think that Albazi gets past Brandon Moreno. Royval has the win over Moreno. He has a win over Kai Kara France. He has the losses, obviously, to Pantoja, but Pantoja, it's been announced that he's fighting Kai Asakura in November. Should Asakura win that fight, then that's fresh blood that you can justify sliding Brandon Royval into that title shot. And hopefully that's the case for him, that Kai Asakura comes in, takes over the belt, then you have your title shot that opens up right then and there. In the co-main event, you had a gritty battle back and forth between 2 middleweight veterans. You had Junior Park and Brad Tavares. Now, Park, his head is something that should be studied by science. No pun intended for topics that we'll cover later. But, I mean, the way that he was able to just continue to absorb the damage and move forward despite Brad Tavares, as we know, having those coconut bombs, it was impressive to see, but it wasn't enough to be able to defeat Brad Tavares. Now, Tavares is one that we've spoken about on this program many a times. He's been around in the UFC for a decade plus now. He was a part of The Ultimate Fighter season 11. He's been a fixture of that 185-pound division. He's been kind of a litmus test for a lot of rising contenders throughout the last few years. This was a matchup that was kind of a bone for each of these older vets, that they didn't have to go in there and face a young, hungry dog who was looking to make a name off of them. They could face a gritty veteran that they can try to be able to get a win off of. Same thing happened in the feature fight. A couple of vets who needed to get their hand raised. have floated between a couple of different weight classes, have had somewhat of a journeyman arc to their career, and that was Chidi and Jokawani taking on Jared Gooden. Jared Gooden is a guy who, when he's on, he's on. And when he's off, it is usually not the greatest of nights for him. Now, Chidi and Jokawani, I think it's crazy that he gets all the way down to 170 pounds now. When we're talking about a guy who is like 6'3" and once fought at 205, being able to make that cut that far down. It's insane to me that he's able to make the cut and not be completely compromised in the process. But he did run into a couple of lessons in the way, and him going down to welterweight was essentially his way of slapping a fresh coat of paint on it and seeing what's left in the tank in his mid-30s now and closing out the contract that he's on and hopefully getting re-signed and making the most that he can with what's left of his fight career. Grant Dawson, though, stole the show with his promo that he cut after a pretty dominant performance over Rafa Garcia. Stylistically, on paper, both of these guys have a wrestle heavy style. They're strong grapplers, but Grant Dawson was just purely dominant in the process. Grant Dawson goes on to cut a promo, and I think that this is a great move from Grant Dawson. He's had a couple of these throughout his career, and I think that that kind of helps boost his profile. Stylistically, he doesn't have the most entertaining fight tactics and tools. As mentioned, he's a very wrestle heavy style. You know, he might grind you out from here to there, and he's going to work ground and pound, going to work the clock, going to work positions. Not to say that he doesn't get finishes in the process, but it's just not going to be some of the quote unquote sexy knockouts that you see from your Alex Pereiras, your Prates, those guys of the worlds. Grant Dawson, though, is a funny guy. So in that sense, he is entertaining. The infamous vegetable line, when he was asked, "What's your favorite vegetable?" by one of the reporters on a media day, and he said his grandpa. Like, that's funny. It's dark humor, or sometimes it's nerdy. It may be a little bit cringy, but as Danny's cracking up behind the boards over here, it's funny. He gives kudos to his wife, Elle Dawson, after the fight, who she's also a pro fighter, and says that he credits a lot of his success in his career to his wife, who is the ultimate support system for him. And he said that aside from her support, that's the second favorite thing about her that he likes. The number one thing is that she has a dump truck that you could bounce a quarter off of. And the production crew, the cameramen at ESPN, they played it perfectly. They had the camera on Elle's face the entire time. She was full blushing, all on in the moment. Grant's laughing away while he's cutting the promo in the cage. Afterwards, in the post-fight press conference, he doubles down with his comments, and you have to love it. And he said exactly that. He said, "Hey, you know what? I may not be a crazy, smack talker or someone who's going to have the back and forth jabs and improv barbs, but I am funny. So I'm just going to let my inner me or my funny side start showing more." And kudos to you, Grant Dawson, for A, picking up the win, and then B, still in the show with that incredible promo that you cut there. We had a middleweight fight between a couple of vets here in Daniel D-Rod Rodriguez and Alex Morono. Couple of longtime vets that slugged it out for 15. It's one of those fights, I think, that on this entire main card, for the most part, aside from Tatsuro being the 25-year-old, this was filled with veterans. This was vets on vets matchups, and it was just, for me as a fight nerd, fun to watch a lot of guys who, hey, this is something that they've been doing at the highest of high levels in the big show for years now. And it's nothing against some of the younger guys, but when you've had 2, 3, 4 plus contracts into the UFC, there is a very evident skill set that you possess, and it's not absolute. It's not completely roster wide, but the level of consistency of talent for you to be able to achieve that many contracts within the UFC, that standard just rises through time. Now, on the undercard, on the flip side, we saw definitely a little bit more of a mix of people who are early on in their career, along with a few vets. And again, you just see the difference in some of the levels in the caliber. It's nothing against them. It's just time in the saddle that's the difference. One of them being, hey, Jonathan Pierce is a tremendous wrestler. The guy can keep a crazy pace most of the time and can wrestle hard for 15. But he went in there against a guy in Pat Sabatini, who at one point in time was one of the hottest rising prospects in the entire featherweight division, was a CFFC champion, had just fought some of the tops of the top that you could offer at 145 pounds. Since he's been in the UFC, he's had a couple of big wins, had a couple of unfortunate losses, but he was back in an impressive fashion with that standing rear naked choke this last weekend. And again, it just goes to show that there are levels to the game, and especially if you're talking, you want to grapple with a submission specialist who comes from that lineage out east the way that he does, you're going to have a really tough night if that's your route to victory that you're going to choose. Junior Tafa, he stepped in on short notice. This is a kid who's very young into his fight career. We saw him enter the UFC at only a few fights. Now he's amassed himself to a 6-3, or excuse me, went into that contest at 6-3, picks up the win. That mullet was flowing like crazy. This fight card was one that, outside of that top ranked matchup in the main event, probably flew under the radar for a lot of folks, especially based on the time slot. It was a midday card. Last weekend was huge for the masses in college football, so it didn't get that marquee spot on ESPN's timeline. But again, you have the opportunity for these fight night cards to watch some incredible action. And if you miss that main event, that's not going to give it the nod of outright saying, "Oh, hey, this is fight of the year," but this is definitely on a short list of, I would say, dare you five. Let me know on social media. What do you guys think? Is that a top 5 fight of the year? That is me, Jordan Kurtz, at Comments from the Peanut Gallery, or reach to us at Mile High Sports. Transitioning from the UFC, going to go over the 5280 show real quick. That was a Muay Thai matinee that we had going down at the Stampede. We had a couple of young men who fought for that ISKA title in the main event here on the show last week. Congratulations to Cordell Hansen of Colorado Combative Sports Academy for winning the title in the main event. It was a tight fight that resulted in a split decision. There was a lot of feelings exchanged back and forth in the process, but that's to be expected when it's a fight that we're splitting hairs on. There was a swing round in the third that it was as tightly contested as you could have had. I think, in my opinion, it came down to that third round. 1 and 2 went to Cordell, 4 and 5 went to Mauricio. It's all up to the interpretation in that third round, which I believe was the swing. 2 judges saw it one way, 1 saw it the other. That's the fight game. Sometimes when you're talking that close of action, there's going to be very few points or sequences that could sway that decision one way or the other. In the co-main event, you had Natalia Esquivel winning by decision, an aggressive and violent performance. It was impressive to see. Nehemiah, or Lee Richardson, wins by decision, got his hand raised. That's a hard-fought victory that he's been in the fire trying to earn for a couple of contests now. So congratulations to Lee. Love to see the perseverance and getting through and getting that hand raised. Lucas Hightree won by unanimous decision. Daniel Varela won by unanimous decision. We had a split decision victory by Joe Leal. Brittany Medina came out there throwing bombs right from the beginning, punches and bunches, utilized her range very effectively, mixing the hands along with the kicks, and utilized some clinch work. She picked up the unanimous decision victory. Connor Betts with an impressive second round TKO. You also had Kyder Bertram with multiple knockdowns en route to a TKO in the second round. You had a gritty war that went back and forth between Melanie Jimenez and Michelle Franco, which resulted in a majority draw. Aaron Trevino was probably the card stealer in terms of going out there and impressing and putting on an electric performance. He had a second round TKO that, I say, for a young kid and at that size. I mean, for 117 pounds, that was a lot of power. And then naturally, the speed was out of this world. Fun fight to watch, fun young kid to be able to follow going forward in the future. Caitlin Ross picked up a unanimous decision victory. Donovan Otero slugged it out for a split decision. That was power versus volume. Judges saw it for the power side. I would have to agree. The power produced more devastating reactions and impact on the damage side of things of the equation. Mitch Zubko won by unanimous decision. Fernando Reyes also won by split decision victory. Over the weekend, across the pond in Germany for Octagon MMA, Mallory Martin of Easton's Training Center out of here in Denver, Colorado, won the Strawweight World Championship for Octagon MMA. So congratulations to you, Mallory, picking up that victory. Still to this day, some of my favorite promos and clips of anybody in the cage, the Nobody Can Save You, the Happy Halloween, or the post-fight promo clip with Laura Sanko, where she talks about the confidence. I'm more confident in myself than the fact that Monday comes after Sunday. Just one that you have to love in the process. Want to mention real quick this week's Dana White Contender Series. Tonight, you have Denver native, Sheridan High School graduate, and Adam State University graduate as well, Luis Grim-Gurley. He has taken on Nick Piccinini. This is a short notice fight for Luis. Took it on only a few days. He made weight officially at, I believe it was 125.5. Steps in again on short notice and is able to go out there and fight for a chance to earn a UFC victory this evening. Luis, we're all here behind you. You're one of the most violent and exciting prospects that is not signed to the UFC right now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do tonight with your opportunity and with your chance. That wraps up the weekend recap as well as tonight's Contender Series preview. Now, we're going to chat for a few minutes about this weekend's UFC Fight Night card. This has a couple of ranked matchups in the process, and fight in the main event is a showcase of two middleweights who I am always tuning in no matter when or who it is that they're fighting. You have number 13 ranked Anthony Fluffy Hernandez taking on number 14 ranked Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira is energy, just pure and simple. That guy is energy every single time that he walks to the octagon. The question for him is always ultimately going to be, how can he most efficiently use some of that? At times, it's almost anxious energy that manifests itself into explosive movements that get him tired. But ever since he's made the move to welterweight, he has been on a tear. What he has done so far in terms of his submission finishes and his KO TKO finishes at middleweight is nothing short of impressive. Now, there are some measures that are being taken into place from the rule set overall, and you know that they're going to be keeping a closer eye on him and the way that he backflips to engage his opponents on the ground, because there is absolutely the argument to be made that he's kneed them in the head, or he's struck a grounded opponent in the process while he's backflipping over their guard. But on the flip side of the coin for this fight, you have an absolute dog. Despite the nickname Fluffy, Anthony Hernandez is hard as nails. This is a Northern California kid who, he doesn't care who you are. You were a world champion in jiu-jitsu and you're one of the most respected grapplers to ever compete on the mats. Cool story, bro. I'm going to submit you, just like he did to Rodolfo Vieira. All along, he's fought top-tier competition, and he's been able to climb himself to the rankings with a 12-2 record. The only major flub that I can speak to or that, that really sticks out to me was when the body shot caught him from Kevin Holland. But aside from that, again, you're talking about a guy who he hits hard. He has a relentless gas tank. He has strong wrestling, and he has a growing submission skill set, which makes him dangerous for anybody in the process. You have someone who has that hard of a head and that relentless of a gas tank. If you don't figure out a way to neutralize him, He is going to push you into the dark water. With the styles clash of this matchup of such a fast twitch and explosive based fighter against someone who is just going to be a gritty in your face, slug it out dog, take my money. I'm here for it. How do you guys see this one playing out? Let us know on social media. Reach out to us at Mile High Sports or me, Jordan Kurtz, at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. In the co-main event, it's a bantamweight matchup that has fireworks written all over it. You have number 10 ranked Rob Font taking on number 12 ranked Kyler Phillips. Rob Font is a guy who has tremendous talent, but as we've seen in a couple of these top ranked fights and matchups that he has, there are a couple of holes that he has in his game, such as the wrestling department, which unfortunately was exposed in one of his recent fights where he had against Corey Sandhagen. Corey Sandhagen tore his arm or tore muscles in his arm in the very first few sequences of the first round. And he basically got pinned for the entirety of the fight by a guy with one arm. So as far as defensive wrestling or, working get ups to get back to his feet, I hope that he's done a lot of work with that in the meantime, because the Matrix, Kyler Phillips, and the work that he gets from the stable of top tier bantamweights that they have down there at the MMA lab in Phoenix, I would imagine is going to go out there and try to put Rob's back up against the fence and then get him down to the canvas. If you allow Rob Font to fight at range, he's a tremendous boxer. His skill set when he's on the feet flows so well. Kyler Phillips, though, is a multi-tool fighter. He can beat you on the feet. He can wrestle you. He can also beat you in the grappling department with his submission game. I think that Kyler Phillips in this matchup has the opportunity to go out there and springboard himself off of a longtime veteran. And I just think that he has more routes to victory. That's why I would side with Kyler Phillips in this particular matchup. In the feature fight, we have a flyweight bout between Charles the Energy Johnson taking on Suma Derji. Charles Johnson was a performance bonus winner of that UFC Denver card here with his third round knockout against Joshua Van. Charles Johnson is also a former LFA champion. He was an endurance athlete prior to getting into fighting. And I think that has paid dividends throughout the entirety of his career, whether that was his run in the LFA and becoming a champion there or throughout his time in the UFC. He can keep that pace for the full fight. And I know that Charles Johnson is hungry to go out there and to continue to rise up the ranks. I know that just by his statements that he put out on social media, he wasn't happy with Kai Asakura being able to go out there and jump the entire line. So this is an opportunity for Charles to go out there and stake his claim and do something impressive to put his name in front of the public and in front of the rankings voters so that he can try to climb towards the top 15 in the rankings and then ultimately toward that title shot that he is coveting in the future. You have Brady Heastan taking on Jake Hadley. Brady Heastan, a fan favorite, a kid who we've gotten to watch grow up since he was on The Ultimate Fighter. I think that this is a good opportunity and a fight for him to go out there and amplify his platform with all of the marketing that's going to be pushed behind him this week. As we well know, if you were a big part of a tough season, and especially if you go out there and you win it, you're going to get a push. You're going to get a little bit of extra oomph, if you will, from the UFC. A matchup that I don't see going the distance at all is going to open up this main card. And this might, dare I say, still fight of the night. You have Darren the Damage Elkins taking on Daniel Pineda. Daniel Pineda, every win out of 28 is pretty much a finish. And then you have Darren Elkins, who he is not done until you completely put him away. It is absolutely, as his nickname suggests, the damage. And this is one that I think that you have these veterans in the featherweight division with a tremendous amount of experience who They want to go out there and they want to put on 50K type of performances. So make sure that you check them out. And headlining the prelims as we round out this segment, you have a ranked matchup in the flyweight division between Mateus Nicolau taking on Asu Almabayev. That is number 7 taking on number 14. Obviously, that's a potential big jump for the number 14 ranked guy who is fresh into the rankings. How do you guys see this card going? Do you have maybe a multi-legger that you want to share for the fans out there? Let us know. Reach out to me on Instagram or on Threads. That's Jordan Kurtz at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Moving along here as we're running close on time, we're going to go into a segment now as it relates to the recent developments with the UFC's antitrust lawsuit. There's been multiple statements and fighters that have joined within the proceedings that's been made public over the last few days. Largely, the takeaways from the statements were the injuries, just general injuries and the healthcare related to them, as well as naturally the CTE and the brain trauma issues. CTE and other long-term symptoms that are consistent with a traumatic brain injury or TBI are unfortunately going to be a factor for a large number of fighters. There's been a drastic number of measures that have been taken in training programming and methodology to reduce the risk. But at the end of the day, this is still a combat sport. The CTE related statements that have been presented in a recent proceeding of the lawsuit are definitely tough to hear from some of the guys. But for me, as a longtime fight fan and an NFL football fan, I really don't think that we can still play the I didn't know the risks card. OGs of the golden era, sure, they get the pass. But I'll, like I say, give them the benefit of the doubt. But anyone from like the Tough Boom or mid 2000s on, after Dr. Will Smith went around with the whole concussion movie and all of that, I just don't think that we can say, based on the data that is available, that we can call ourselves unaware of the risks that are involved. Now, it does break my heart to hear that some of our heroes of years past, like Shane Carwin and Vanderlei Silva and those of that sort, are experiencing symptoms regularly. But this is also where we have to take a look at everything from the top down. I've said it many times on this program that there needs to be protection for fighters from themselves at the end of their careers. Commissions should not allow you to go back out there after multiple straight knockout losses. Training also has to continue to be improved for the most part. Like, again, you're not going to completely avoid shots to the head. It's what you signed up for. It is fighting at the end of the day. But long gone should be the old school way of showing up and just banging out every day, which obviously increases the overall injury rate as well as the number of concussive blows on the brain. If we talk about a couple of the names that were fixtures of the headlines the last few days, one of them being Vanderlei Silva. Vanderlei's origins are the infamous Shoot the Box Academy in Brazil, where they are known for going balls to the wall every day. How many knockouts happened in training and those guys just went back the very next day and did everything all over again? Also, those guys who fought in the years of unregulated or unsanctioned bouts where there was no mandatory suspensions, there was nothing done on the regulatory side that said, oh, you know what? You got knocked out in that fight. Well, you're going to be gone for 180 days. You're going to be gone for 90 days, whatever, so on and so forth, in terms of medical suspensions that commissions will give out today, which those could also still be improved as far as the process. Shane was a grudge guy. And it's been stated on the record that they used to get down and just throw bombs on the regular every day. And it was survival with all those heavyweights that were there at grudge. Brandon Schaub being on the record now with it being Schaub, take it for what it's worth. But He said that him and Shane, regular training partners, went concussion rounds throughout the majority of their careers that they spent together in the training room. It's the hurt business and injuries are going to happen. But overall, what I would love to see is a healthcare plan for fighters. First, for active fighters on the roster that aren't covered with health insurance as it currently stands. And most of them don't have any form of health insurance, which is crazy to me. They only have the accidental coverage in the event of an injury within the fight. That's why you see so many fighters take a bout while injured because A, they need to get paid, even if it's just show money, and B, that's the only way that they won't be completely out of pocket for medical expenses and to get their treatment. One of the names of the recent days is former WEC star and UFC vet Miguel Torres, and he spoke on having significant injuries going into major fights throughout his career, but felt pressure from promoters to fight, and he also didn't have health insurance, so he needed to fight in order to be able to get treatment covered once the contest was done. This is a common thing in this world. I also think that having a system in place for continued care for former fighters is needed. There's a considerable amount of injuries that will either linger or have prolonged degenerative effects on the body long after a fighter's career in the cage is done. Like leagues in the Big Four, let there be a tenure system. If there must be one, if you have to have some sort of qualifiers, start by saying you are only eligible for this long-term care if you fought through, say 3 contracts or 12 fights, whichever comes first, and then tier it from there as far as coverage amounts, like you do for compliance pay from Venom. Say 12 to 20 fights gets X amount of coverage. 21 to 35 fights gets Y amount of coverage. 35 plus fights gets Z coverage. All those numbers are just for round and example's sake. Obviously, there would have to be an extensive amount of data done into what would qualify for the best numbers and ranges. But again, the difficulty from the promotion side, though, is especially with some of these older fighters who competed for multiple organizations across their career, like Silva, Torres, Verdum, Tim Sylvia, the UFC can come back and say, well, this damage occurred outside of the UFC, or this happened over the course of, so long. Why are we on the hook to pay for it? Well, that's what we have to figure out going forward in terms of a long-term system. I am nowhere near the big brain level operating power to figure that out. That's why something at the macro level needs to be done. But we are running out of time here, folks, to close out the show and go 3 rounds. I've got my man, Danny Bailey, behind the boards for me right here. First round. What do we have?
Dana White has been on a rampage. Oh, sorry about that. Dana White has been on a rampage against the rankings lately, saying that he is actively looking to reform the process with AI and eliminate the voters. Any thoughts?
He started the statement by saying the morons struck again after he saw that Khalil Roundtree is still sitting at number 8. And I do totally agree and understand that the rankings are flawed. But the argument from Dana would probably hold a lot more weight if he wasn't matching Stipe in a title fight in just a few weeks. I say, I don't disagree. Rankings need reform. There needs to be better things done in the process. But he's kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth here.
Both Cowboy Cerrone and Tony Ferguson have said they are coming out of retirement. Do you have any interest in seeing either one fight again?
Zero interest. This is what I was just speaking to in the previous segment of fighters at the end of their run need to be protected from themselves. Cowboy, hey, he had a bad run toward the end, suffered a bunch of losses. He's been gone from the game for a couple of years. He's been on the sauce, a bunch of peptides. His body, he says, feels healed. But, I mean, he's been running on leaded fuel for the last couple of years. So even with him going and getting all of that out of his system, if he, quote unquote, passes a clean drug test, that doesn't mean that his body still hasn't benefited from the effects of the gear. So, no, I don't want to see him back in the mix, nor do I want to see Tony Ferguson. Ride off into the sunset, go be in movies, enjoy the ranch.
Well, speaking of being in movies, Conor McGregor was in proper form at last weekend's BKFC event, with about as many headlines drawn as humanly possible in such a short window. At what point do we actually become concerned for his well being?
If you haven't sounded the bells or the alarms of panic for the overall well-being or the trajectory of where Connor's life, not just his career, his life is heading with his choices right now, then he should probably start doing so if you're the people that are close around him. He is out of control. He is completely reckless. The live stream that he had for the betting platform about a week ago, totally unhinged behavior. If you're any sort of like PR executive, or I mean, David Feldman from BKFC had to have immediately regretted putting a microphone in Connor's hands. He goes in there and he says, not only are we going to give them a bonus, but we're going to double their purses. Like starts just talking about, doubling up the financials for the promotion. That's totally unhinged. And him being a part owner of that promotion, what constitutes verbal with what is actually in the written contract. It just creates a nightmare for the rest of the promotion and for the PR department there at BKFC. Then afterwards is probably what drew the most attention. Again, Connor 3 sheets to the wind, partying his brains out at the after party. One of the BKFC lady champions was standing in front of him. Connor is right there. I mean, he had to have forgotten that his wife Dee was standing right next to him, but she's right in front, and Connor just gives her a little yank and pull on the on the hair, on the ponytail. And it's like, bro, what are you doing? You are in public. Like, you have to know that you're Conor McGregor and there are eyes and cameras on you at all times. And D just kind of snaps at him and he just like backs off, like, I was just playing around. I was just grabbing a head. Dude, you cannot do that. You are a part owner in the company. You are the biggest name in combat sports and globally one of the most recognized humans that walks the planet. You are now held to a different standard from the regular or the common person. Your life, whenever you are not in the privacy of your own home, you can basically consider is under 100% surveillance if you are the profile of a Conor McGregor. This cannot happen. Obviously, the fight situation with Chandler and the fallout and all of the substance abuse in the process, the bells for concern and alarm should be ringing at full volume right now because we've seen this from other celebrities and it does not end well. But just like that, folks, we are all out of time. We want to thank you all so much for tuning in for this original combat sports program each and every week. We want to thank everybody here at the Mile High Sports Network for putting out incredible content on the regular. Make sure that you smash that like, share, and subscribe. Follow on all socials as well. I want to thank my man, Danny Bailey, behind the boards for holding it down for me. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. We will see you back next week. Same time, same place.